On the day I went to pick up my relocation vehicle, I was really nervous. Here I was for the first time about to realise my dream of driving a campervan alone through the guts of Australia. The journey was Adelaide to Darwin, just a little over 3,000 kilometres from the bottom to the top. Just going to go up to near Clare. I've got a friend who lives up there. It's only like an hour and a half away. Either I'm going to stay there the night or go all the way to Port Augusta. After an initial setback due to brake problems, I was finally on my way. Not knowing how long it would be before I saw him again, my first point of call was my friend Bernie's place, just a little out of Clare.
Coming back to the simplicity, I think there's value in that. Absolutely good value.
As was often the case between Bernie and myself, our conversation soon turned to religious and philosophical matters.
Well, I think it goes deeper. For me, it goes deeper than that, Pietro, because that part of us that thinks it's superior, it actually stops me from learning. It actually stops me from getting it.
The next day, after a hearty breakfast, I helped Bernie with some pressing errands around his property before finally getting back on the road again. Oh look, what do I see? It's a Woolies. It's a Woolworths. Jokes aside, there was nothing particularly outback about Port Augusta, and at first glance, it was a little lackluster. Oh, look what I spot. Cockatoos! I found this campsite here on Wikicamps. It was right in front of the Central Augusta Football Club. And at $10 a night, it gave me peace of mind to know that I wasn't camping alone. With a population of 14,000 people, Port Augusta, or Gurnada in the indigenous language, is situated at the very top of Spencer Gulf. Its economy is multifaceted, with a solar power plant that produces electricity for South Australia. It has an arid zone horticultural industry that produces 15,000 tonnes yearly of truss tomatoes for Coles Supermarket. It has a tourism industry, and the Port Augusta Airport handles about 16,000 fly-in, fly-out passengers a year who work at the many mine sites in the north of South Australia.
Be in chaos, but we'll just walk through it. So
my first fuel stop after Port Augusta was Spud's Roadhouse, and as is typical of these places sparsely dotted along the Stuart Highway, to remain viable, the Roadhouse provides a multitude of facilities and services. Situated in the tiny town of Pimba, the Roadhouse is serviced twice weekly by two iconic trains, the Gar and the Indian Pacific.
I said, "Who's this man?" And I looked him up. "Who's this group?" And I looked up who they were, and then I looked...
A short 20-kilometre drive from Pimba is the Island Lagoon Lookout, a rest stop for travellers that provides an impressive view down across the vast Salt Lake and Erna Island, a view almost as desolate and imposing in scope as any Martian landscape. It's here that the Island Lagoon tracking station, Deep Space Station 41, resides, the first to be established outside of the US in 1960. There's just the one road to get to Darwin from Adelaide, and that road is the Stuart Highway. It's a narrow, 2-lane road, the bare minimum. That said, it's a tidy, well-maintained road for most of the way, or at least in South Australia, where the roads aren't so subject to seasonal flooding, like in the Northern Territory. Here I am at Lake Hart. It's pretty amazing, let me tell you. It turns out Lake Hart is Australia's prized salt deposit, and back in the 1920s, it produced some 9,000 tonnes annually. The refinery, however, has been closed for nearly a century. Its distance from any major city proved the venture unworkable financially.
So then I organised and I looked, and they used to have a stall set up. So we have a Don Miller's Bakery, a famous, it's like your Tim Hortons, yeah? We have a bakery chain in Uluru.
As I slowly inch my way on the map towards Coober Pedy, the panorama advanced and receded before me, forever changing and yet always remaining a dry and arid landscape. One thing was undeniably obvious. I was in the middle of South Australia, reputedly the driest state on the driest continent on Earth. As undeniably beautiful as it was, one could sense utter catastrophe, forever present, just waiting for you to put one foot wrong. Glendambo's major drawcard was the fact that it was the last fuel stop for some 253 kilometres before arriving at Coober Pedy. Its population was about 30, and like most other outback towns along the Stuart highway, its very existence relied on the highway traffic. I loved the giant windmill. This was probably my last rest stop before Coober Pedy. I found the parched panoramic view both serene and majestic. I know that in outback Australia there are thousands of square kilometres of unfenced grazing lands, and I imagine this to be one of them. The only thing missing was the livestock. Even a tiny mob of kangaroos would have been nice. Here it is, pretty dry, just how I thought. I'd left Port Augusta at around 8 AM that morning, so after 10 hours on the road, I was glad to have finally arrived at the famous opal mining town of Coober Pedy.